Welcome to Cybersecurity Where You Are, the Center for Internet Security's podcast. I'm Sean Atkinson, CISO at CIS.
And I'm Tony Sager, Senior Vice President and Chief Evangelist at CIS. Cybersecurity affects us all, whether we're online at home, managing a company, supporting clients, or running a state or local government.
So join us on Wednesdays as we discuss trends and threats, explore security best practices, and interview experts in the industry.
Together, we'll clarify these issues, creating confidence in the connected world. Well, welcome back to the podcast series from the Center for Internet Security, Cybersecurity Where You Are. We take the chance to talk about some of the most interesting topics and speak with some of the most interesting people in the industry. So great to have you back. We appreciate your time and your attention on this, and have a really special guest today, an old friend in the business. I don't remember exactly how we met, but maybe we'll come back to that. Vilius Benetis. Vilius, welcome to our podcast, and thank you for joining us.
Hello, everyone. Yes, I'm Vilius Benetis from NRD Cybersecurity from Lithuania, a Northern European small nation. It's a tricky story. I try to remember how we met and how we start communicating before we meeting. I think it was around 2014 when Lithuania was trying to find our own perspective towards cybersecurity, especially as at that year, Ukraine first time was attacked and we got a little bit scared, and I said, okay, we need to do more in digital cyber. And then your methodology was one of the shining stars for our government in Lithuania. And I think physically we met in Washington, D.C. when we jointly went to World Bank to do joint seminar for them.
Yeah, thanks for the reminder. And that timing, Vilius, for the audience. So I'd retired from the National Security Agency in 2012, and wound up doing a couple of odd things, but basically taking over what became the CIS Critical Security Controls. So appreciate it. And you're one of our interesting stories. Again, no one called you up, right? You found it on your own, the work with the controls, I think, and that you were part of what we were aiming for. Folks looking for an independent source of judgment of what to do about cybersecurity. So thanks for the reminder of that. And again, thank you for joining us here. So let's go back to that time there. What intrigued you about the controls as a source of guidance?
At that time, I think even though ISO 27001 was already existing and many organizations, the more important organizations, start to move towards structuring their cybersecurity posture, understanding where the ends and how everything should be fitting, and then does information security is synonymous with cybersecurity or not, etc. And then the controls were a reasonable, logical approach where to put focus and moving away from generic words like risk management, security should be risk-based, etc. But rather, look, do this, this, and this, which are very clear and technically understood actions, which would improve your immunity, your immune system, your resilience toward adversaries.
Yeah, that's a great point, and that's what we were aiming for. The controls had its origin in some work we did at the National Security Agency, and then got sort of amplified by the SANS Institute. But the goal was always to simplify the language, to be clearer, more prescriptive. That is, you didn't have to interpret too much on what to do. And that's what I saw as one of the problems with the larger security frameworks, is they tried to cover all cases, which left a lot of room for interpretation and therefore lots of room for misinterpretation. So I think that you caught the spirit of what we were trying to do at the time. Let's talk a little about the trip to the World Bank, though, because that's intriguing. What was your interest in talking to the World Bank about cybersecurity?
At that time, we already were suppliers for different projects around the world for them. We were bidding for the tenders and we're winning them in Bangladesh, Bhutan, and some other locations. As well, at that time, we were working in East Africa. We had countries. We had an office in Tanzania. So, for example, in Tanzania, together with the Saka local chapter, we are organizing the national events. Later on, it was in Uganda as well. And then we, as workshops, were presenting controls. At that time, it was 20 controls. and discussing and showing that realistically it's not only about antivirus, but there are other things to be done, maybe before antivirus. For example, knowing what's connected and what's installed, and then all kind of defenses, and discussing how it all can work. And having a discussions with World Bank, and I still continue having such seminars with them from time to time. And recently, as well in December, when I was visiting them, showing some real examples and exemplifying how things could practically work in incident response. My professional focus is on one of the further on controls is incident response, building certs and SOCs for nations. So it's not a priority. I don't create inventory lists, but at the end of the day, all controls up till the incident response are crucial to have less stress on when incidents happen, or maybe having less incidents in organizations.
Yeah, that's something that you understood early that I think a lot of folks didn't. That is, incident response is connected to your ability to manage, which creates both the data, the processes, and so forth that allow you to manage an incident. In other words, if you haven't done those things, as I observed in my career, if you haven't, if you don't know what you have, if you don't have good processes in place, if you haven't put the basic controls in place, recovering from an incident is pretty hard. You just don't know what you have or had, and so it's hard to reestablish that. But tying those together, I think, is a really key part of it. And I know you were very on top of that. I mean, my interest, Vilius, in the World Bank that we shared at that time was, for someone like the World Bank who's dealing with, say, countries that are relatively early in an IT maturity. The pitch I was making at the time for the audience was, if you're making that investment, wouldn't you like to preserve the value of that investment, right? If you're helping someone modernize their banking system, for example, or putting in place sort of currency management, you want that to be put to good use and not be stolen by somebody. You don't want it to be undermined by, the criminality that was starting to really sweep the world then. And so you want to make good practice part of the grant, right? To not only modernize the banking, but do it in a way that preserves the value that you're trying to create. And that's that's something we all want, right? Is to make sure that we our money is well spent, whether it's our money or a grant or whatever. And so thank you for carrying that story and continuing to press for good practice as really an underpinning of that kind of information.
And in these territories, then working, I used controls in different, I would say, very effective ways. For example, these entity diagrams from version 5, I think, of controls, they're showing what has to be done, but not mentioning name of technology. Which technology should do that? Is it firewall? Is another component? It doesn't matter. But for diagnosis, for example, talking with one of the private banks in Bangladesh, they had some issues in security of ATMs and some other components. And I brought in Excel and said, okay, look, if we would focus only on these entity diagrams, we have these items mentioned on all the scenarios, and let's discuss what you currently have covered with what technology and what is missing, and then let's think together what could be as well additionally automated, maybe just enabling some other features, or maybe buying on top something on this vendor, or doing some other activities. Let's think, should it be manual or should it be automated? If it's automated, then it might work. So that was, for example, this test and filling in all the entities, how an organization works. It might take half an hour of conversation, and you have kind of fast diagnosis, and then you can discuss, okay, where the biggest gaps, and then it's mapped to how many controls particular automation is being used, and then you say, okay, look, we are 6 times mentioned 6 use cases, and you don't have it, so maybe it's worth to spend it, because that will probably going to be reasonable and valuable for your organization.
No, that's a great point, Vilius. And they, too often, right? It's the temptation is, I need to buy something, or I need to listen to the marketplace. and being able to raise the discussion one step above that, right, to focus on the information flow and what the control and the processes. All right, now you're inspiring me to think about the entity diagrams again for the next version of the controls. But that point, yeah. So that's the nature of these security frameworks, right? You have the kind of very large, comprehensive, the ISO 27001, the NIST 853. I mean, there's a place for that, an important place, right? It sort of covers everything, but that's too overwhelming for people. And then you have the opposite end of the spectrum, which is well, go buy this product or this subscribe to this information feed, or and it's tempting to go there because it's very concrete. And somewhere in the middle, we think is the sweet spot, right? That is, you want to, as you said, you want to focus on the function and what you're, how would you approach it, as opposed to the product first. By standing back from that, that gives you a more strategic look, and to say, how do I build a security program? Not how do I buy a thing and make it operational, but how do I build a program that's going to grow, evolve, and I want to be able to sustain over time. That means you're focusing at a higher level of abstraction. And I think you're exactly right on that. So we have to give some thought then, I think, how to sustain that thinking for our own work.
Yeah, and for me, controls were always building blocks which you can use to achieve particular objective. Starting from 2014, our National Cybersecurity Center just being built in Lithuania, we made first version of printout of controls as a poster and handed over to organizations, in government organizations in Lithuania, saying, don't think only about antivirus, think about other things, how you achieve particular items. Then it was renewed in new versions, translated in new versions. But additionally now, implementation groups, guidance on how much it might cost for technologies, how to think about different data points, what you can use as construction components to build what's reasonable.
Yes.
In security, because I think for me, the biggest challenge is to understand with reasonability, and it comes from an interesting angle. On media, at least in Lithuania, but I see in other countries as well, that if there's a cybersecurity incident, then people think, oh, they attacked, the victim is a bad person. Or that. But we know that if it's attack, so it's a victim, then we should pity. On the other hand, because of regulations on other aspects, it's probably they were stupid, and then we need to just blame them. So where's the difference between, or the border between stupidity and the victim? First of all, when I tried to understand that, I called the local police and said, cyber police, how do you treat, is the victim or stupid? It's like, for us, it's always victim. So maybe we can laugh a little bit that, okay, how could we do that? But otherwise, it's always victim, because there's a crime committed and we treat as a victim. However, in public media, it's different. And then having been worked on incidents and analyzing different incidents, sometimes, okay, it happened. Probably it's bad, but it was a few years ago when it's all started. And then the practice of cybersecurity was a little bit different by Microsoft and others, where the data was leaked afterwards because they stayed in some places. But then controls show what could be reasonable. And then we say, if we do these things and we still got hacked, so maybe we're not stupid. We tried the right things, but we still get problems because attackers are deliberately trying to infiltrate.
No, that's exactly right. I've been dealing a lot with individuals who are the victims of scams, and part of the message is this: it's you, the ordinary citizen, against professionals, right, who have infrastructure, who are willing to invest a lot of money. That's not a fair fight. It's not reasonable to ask human beings to be able to defend themselves completely. It's reasonable to say there's some things that you ought to do, right? Rational, reasonable. But, like in the case of businesses, it's not reasonable to say a business should bankrupt itself to buy more and more security against some unknown standard of quality or security. So a business has to look at this as a trade-off also, to say, well, what am I putting at risk? What are my legal responsibilities? what would be a rational way for me to behave. But in the U.S., Vilius, reasonableness has a particular a term of art, right? It's a meaning. It's often stated in regulatory or legislative language, but really not defined. Is that true in the country, in Lithuania and other countries that you deal with, or how is that managed? Is it a matter of court cases or regulatory language?
Yeah, I don't see it written in so much in the legal. I think in legal there are some other words used, but for me, what's most interesting is about culture, because this stupid or victim is defined by the culture of people who are communicating. And are they laughing? Oh, you look, we are stupid, how we could? Or they say, but actually it can happen to me as well. And it's not laughable, it's not funny, because we know that. So it's more of a culture at the beginning. What's especially interesting for me, how people perceive it. How they start being afraid to go out on internet, or scared of online businesses, etc. Or it's part of the culture, and it's even the culture of different communities. It can be in one country, different ways of happening in the regions and in the capital, and among older people, younger people, depending on the country, depending on the continent. And that part is formed, the culture is being formed. So if we provide tools, what we can discuss on, say, look, but since when I would not be stupid, but it's already I'm victim. So what do you expect me? Because if I'm in digital, in cybersecurity, or in digital space, then I should be always wearing armor. So is it dangerous place? Is it a war zone, or what it is when we go online, or how to perceive, and what is normal and abnormal? And especially with AI, now we relive that again completely, because there's no borders. What's okay, what's not okay, and then if you get hit, because there's still no immunity systems in AI. What we're building with AI, it's not even clear where the borders of vulnerability.
That's right. But I'm fascinated by your comment about the cultural impact on how the result is perceived, right? Victim or irresponsible. And I think that's exactly right. I mean, there is a culture of sort of blame the victim, right? But you're sort of blaming them for undefined action, right? If you haven't defined something in some either formal or informal way, for example, you talked about public health, right? There in public health, which is a more mature domain of risk, right? We expect certain behaviors would be reasonable, and if you didn't do them, you were not behaving reasonably or responsibly, and that there's a little better understanding of what that means. But in this space, that's much less so. But I hadn't really thought about sort of a culture, the community and local level. What about the role of culture and the way people perceive the role of the government? Is that different for you in Lithuania, or do you see that differently? In other words, people might see this and go, why isn't the government protecting me from these dangers? It's clearly dangerous, clearly damaging to the economy, to my business. How would they perceive the role of the government to provide some level of protection or some clarity on what they should be doing?
So there's expectation of that government should create safe environment, and that's the responsibility, because when we got independent last time, 5 years ago, we at first it was dangerous. I remember myself at university, if you go back home, you can be kicked. Now it's safe. There's no danger in the streets. Most often, you shouldn't be afraid on walking around, and it's due to the good work of police. I'm bicycling all year round, and my bicycle was tried to be stolen here from the office. But police was monitoring people, and they caught and I could get the bike back. And there are different other stories how it works, even when the Facebook accounts are taken over, when there's good partnership with US and others. So, what's important, the trust has to be earned. For example, National Cybersecurity Center has big powers. Now with NIS2 in Europe, they can remove me as the CEO of a company, because they're saying that if I don't comply, etc., I can be removed by assistance of the courts. But currently we don't plan to do that. We don't plan to execute these powers. we want everyone to increase their hygiene, and trying to put that free education, all kind of capabilities, giving some code, defying some software, saying please use it, please try to do it, please do. We are not here to punish you, but encouraging that we need to be resilient. And that's encouraging when government takes that kind of path, not to scare, but to enable the help and the talk to businesses. Do not compete with business. So we say, okay, everybody now has to have a CISO and a SOC, according to NIS2 regulation. However, then it's either themselves they can have or can hire from businesses. So naturally, there's more demand of services, fractional CISO services, etc. And then, as it's being practiced, more and more people understand what is this discipline, and there are more and more people who can live in that. And then I see that's how local ecosystems being developed in the nations. And me working in many places around the world, I try to encourage, think about this ecosystem, local ecosystem development, and then using like controls and other frameworks to focus on what's good, what's reasonable. Again, the same used and abused word, reasonable.
No, I get it. And I think, what you're doing is sort of establishing, I'll say from a grassroots level, from a bottom up level, right? These are the practices that make sense. And you, I'm sure you watched in the U.S., right? There's often a cycle between, let's encourage voluntary behavior by the industry, and shifting to now we have to regulate from the top down, behavior, and both extremes, have some pluses but also lots of minuses, right? It's hard to get people to move. And it sounds like the approach that you're seeing and encourage is this: let's make it clear the messaging as to what's reasonable to do, but demonstrate it, right? And have some clarity so that we start to build that up. Ever feel like cybersecurity is a giant jigsaw puzzle and someone forgot to give you the corner pieces?
Or the box lid, the table, or the time?
Exactly. That's where the CIS Secure Suite platform comes in.
It's your intuitive starting point for cybersecurity. One dashboard with the functionality of Syscat Pro dashboard and CIS CSET Pro built in.
From policy to implementation, it puts the puzzle together for you. CIS controls? Check. CIS benchmarks? Double check.
And it's built for CIS Secure Suite members. You're getting a streamlined experience with the guidance that turns data into decisions.
Like seeing where your biggest risks are and knowing exactly what to do next. Share results easily with internal security teams from one great tool.
Plus, it helps you align with frameworks like NIST and ISO, making you audit ready.
Whether you're a small team or a cyber underdog, the platform gives you the visibility, clarity, and confidence to act.
So if you're ready to stop guessing and start securing, visit cisecurity.org/securesuite to learn more.
CIS Secure Suite Platform. Cybersecurity simplified.
I think what's happening, at least in Europe, European Union countries with NIS2, is we introduce road rules on digital highways. So everybody who brings their own assets, like vehicles, their assets have to be in proper shape, as well the drivers, the organizations who own them and use them, they have to be in same shape. So when thinking as parallel how suddenly from unregulated driving on the roads, suddenly we have to have checkups of the cars, we have to have driving licenses with particular tests, etc. So this is being introduced in our countries, in Europe. Versus before, critical information infrastructure is only the risky parts. If it don't work, then residents of the country is going to be affected. But now we need to feel safe when we drive on the road, that we know that driver from other side or your supplier or your client will not hurt you because they're infected or mismanaged their cyber assets.
That's right. And I think that comparison, to a more classic risk domain, whether it's public health or public safety, transportation kind of safety, is an important one. Having grown up in this business, right, especially for those that work in technology, there's a tendency to think, yeah, that's all good, but we're special. IT security is special. But when you look at the kind of social implications, it says, no, there's risk. And the question is, do we understand the risk? Can we define behaviors, right? And what is reasonable for us as a society to ask of you in order for you to participate. So we don't allow you to drive on a road without, a vehicle that we've defined some safety parameters for, or behavior by the driver that says he's shown he's competent to operate a vehicle. And we have different classes of that, right? Trucks have a different kind of understanding because of the weight and complexity and so forth. And so that seems like a normal social response, right? A national way or a large scale way to think about the cybersecurity problem. That is, what are the rules of the road?
Another interesting aspect as well, cultural. For example, in my childhood, seat belts were not mandatory. Now they're mandatory. So I still remember how to drive without them and how to drive with them. My kids, from the birth, they were always with seat belts. So for them, they never experienced world where you don't put the seat belt. So for them, there's no even question. And we formed that culture. So as soon as we form and we understand that we're going to be older, we're going to maybe complain, or it's like my wife then getting mandatory second factor from Gmail account. She's like, oh, now it's complicated, this and that. But others, when we never seen Gmail without second factor, we'll know, okay, this is how Gmail works. So there's no, so that part I think is generational as well, and we need to think in this longer term that what we build with controls and we practice and we explain. That's as well impactful of the way how to think, and if we promote it well enough, then it will stick and say, yeah, but actually that's a proper way of governance. If I am owner of the asset, I need to manage it. How come I don't know, or who's responsible for that, or can somebody claim that I'm not cleaning up my assets properly? Under which conditions? If it's dangerous to others, public safety, as you mentioned, then naturally I can expect that somebody will come and say, please clean it up.
Yeah. And that resonates, because I have a few years on you, Vilius. And my little sister still has, I think, scars from stitches, falling, tumbling forward in a rapid stop, because seatbelts were not even a thing, at that time. But they became available, right? And they were available long before they became mandatory. And you started to see the market forces of things like insurance. Right, you would have the insurance company would have a different view of, how you would be covered, right, if you didn't have used safety equipment. It goes from identifying a practice to building up, kind of reinforcing things like the incentives, through insurance or other means or discounts, to eventually formalizing it in some structured way. And that feels like a natural path for these. It's not a rapid path, right? It takes time to establish those. But I think it makes sense. If the alternative is try to define, a perfect safety plan up front and mandate it for everybody, imagine the years of arguing. And by the way, you would almost never get it right. It's too hard a problem. There's a lot of experimentation to figure out what's reasonable. So this idea, though, of the controls, then, back to the topic of the controls. So what they do is they do provide you a way to be pretty specific, right? Prescriptive about the things that we ought to do. And as you know, at CIS, we try to back that up. We don't just make them up, but we have models and data, working with threat intelligence companies to try and identify that. And you've been part of that translation with us, or the translation from an understanding of attacks and technology into better practice. And so we've structured that over the years. But any other thoughts on if you go into a nation, right, that is starting from scratch, what is your best advice? How do you approach that discussion to help them make progress against it without overwhelming them with detail?
So this particular sequence, how nations go, because there are around 200 sovereign countries in the world. And each of them have to go through the same journey, defining cybersecurity strategy, then legislation, then critical information infrastructure protection, then on and on and on, what has to be defined. So in that particular picture, controls do not come instantly, because it's more higher things, how it's constructed on the responsibilities level, what's for the government, does intelligence have a place somewhere? In some countries it does, in some others not, where police, prosecution, etc. And then operational methods come into play. Then typically national CERT or CSERT, typically they are assigned responsibility to bring awareness and bring good practices. So how to be resilient, what to do in order to be less affected by cyber attacks. And that's where it starts saying, okay, please do this. It can be very tactical. Please configure a second factor on your Facebook account. Or it can be for enterprises saying, look, follow these methodologies or these methodologies. And then typically controls are coming into the play saying, these are practical things. This is what kind of gym exercise you need to do, what kind of vitamins you need to eat to survive winter and be strong and fit.
No, and the way you talk about it, right? So there's practices and methods, and I think my experience, and I think yours also, is that they're connected, right? So you need both, right? Methods and processes allow you to sustain and grow and evolve, but it's also true that if you want to make progress, you have to show progress pretty quickly. People want to know that things will get better, right? So practices, allow you to say this is a specific thing to do that that we can demonstrate value for, that will give you some progress. And so, because there's the human element of saying, putting your name behind it, you have to have some, I remember in the early days of Controls talking to people, I said, they would say things like, my boss has a short attention span. If I don't show some progress in whatever, 30, 60, or 90 days, I'll be fired. I might have a better idea, but I won't get a chance to do anything if I don't show some progress. So you have to kind of mix the short term, right, some payback, with some longer term thinking that says, it's more than buying things. I have to put in place the process, the governance, and so forth to make this long term and sustainable. But I like your approach, right? So the national discussion is about responsibility first, and then thinking more about methods and about practices. And
there are particular guidance, agreed guidance, which International Telecommunication Union, World Bank, many other partners, ourselves, we help to create the handbooks for national cybersecurity strategy. And as projects, we do many of such projects in many countries, smaller, bigger ones, or in the sectors, in financial sector or other areas. So there's particular practices where I feel that probably not enough work being done, that in each of the country, there has to be not only a top-down approach, but as well there has to be ecosystem of the players, local players. So there has to be supply and demand forces working. For example, I remember going to Mongolia, I don't know, 5 years ago probably, and talking to how many cybersecurity companies are here. Almost none. At that time, we created a new law which demanded for critical information infrastructure organizations risk assessments, audits, information security audits, and suddenly the demand starts to pop, but you need to do that, where people start practicing. Maybe somebody start doing that part-time, because we do that internal audit work at the bank, and then in evening maybe we doing for some clients and a little bit of money, maybe we start their own company, and suddenly we are local providers, because in Mongolia you cannot bring too many experts from around the world because it's so remote. And this is how ecosystem starts to grow. So there's a government position and need, forming the need and good practices and the rules of the game. And then ecosystem starts to shape and play and work. And the best way, then these companies, they start exporting to other countries around. That means that we already can bring money, and we can grow even further, building their own national capabilities. And that has to be done for all 200 sovereign countries to take care of their local systems.
No, and that makes a lot of sense. And it's consistent with what you said earlier about sort of establishing. So from the top down, right? The requirement there is for I'll say financial accountability as an example. Therefore, and I have to verify that. So auditing, so sort of creating demand, which the market then starts to meet. Now that won't happen overnight, but it encourages local industry, right? And folks like you have come in to help people sort of start to build that grassroots look at that, deliver the services that would meet the good intentions of that. And and that's one thing I came to appreciate when working with lawmakers in the U.S. they have the best of intentions, right? But they don't speak technology. So they will say higher order things like, you must behave responsibly, you've got to be reasonable, you've got to show accountability, and so forth. But they often don't know how to translate that into technical language, and it's easy to overachieve on that end of it, right? Sort of say, well, we're going to mandate everybody do this, and really what you want is the approach that you talked about, which is I have to build an industry, an ecosystem that is not going to deliver perfect solutions in the next 6 months, but starts to build the infrastructure for improvement. And I think those of us that have been in this a long time, right? We think of this as we're evolving better systems, not suddenly creating them from whole cloth.
So for me, my dilemma is that I love controls. Mm-hmm. And when I think about these ecosystems, we help because we understand that in each of the country, there has to be local suppliers for incident detection and response, but it is low control. So actual work as MSSP or MSP becoming MSSPs, this is the work what we do for many countries in Africa, Southeast Asia, in Caribbean, could be, or other places. So providing assistance for those IT companies who want to start providing services as MSSP, managed security service providers, to grow them, because definitely not every organization will have their own capability, even though it's low on controls list. However, then if you start providing that, we maybe will provide as well better asset inventory, number one, number two, on the controls. Probably we will do vulnerability scanning. We will check on configurations. We'll do other controls, even though the starting service is going to be quite down on the list. And this sounds for me always kind of dilemma. Okay, maybe because that's where I work, that's my primary role. On the other hand, controls as well are crucial, even though I cannot, take the control list and say, look, we start from here. I need to tell from here, and then, but from here you get that part of that as well. If you start getting this security operations properly, it will do many things in the primary controls as well.
No, you're right. And I think part of that, and this is where we've given some thought, and you have thought about this a lot too, it's a supply and demand issue. That is, so why don't MSPs, for example, supply better security? Well, people may ask for it, but if they don't ask in a specific way, then there's really no market demand, right? You have to be able to say, I need you to provide me these kinds of visibility into the assets you're managing for me, for example, or this level of control, this level of recovery. And so you have to find a way to find the common language, right, between the person buying services and the person that's providing them. And I think that's, that down that line somewhere. And you're right, it's not take the control list and start at number one. No, this is a machine that you're building that will have to evolve over time. And I think that, in terms of the national approach to this, I think there's a lot of wisdom there. So one of the reasons we had you on for this, aside that you're one of the most interesting people I know in cybersecurity, Vilius, is your role for us as what we call a CIS Controls ambassador. You were doing this before we had a name for such things. That is, sort of picking ideas that things that we can provide that allow you to provide this level of service, right? Both at a controls level, but also at a strategic level. So we really appreciate that. So and you are, again, I think by far the most geographically wide-ranging person that I deal with in this industry. Any other things or thoughts that you'd like to give to us at CIS? What else should we be doing to support this kind of work, or what would you see as valuable for the next generation of things that we're producing? And this is not an abstract question. This is a real question, because we're giving a lot of thought to that right now.
So reality is as follows. ISO 27001 is needed, but it's under paid structure. So organizations need to have a governance layer as well. And there's no free, open layer of how to govern. So where to say, it's not about certification of ISO 27001, but it's about what you need to have a risk register, you need to have clear responsibilities, you need to have other things, a little bit CISO role, security responsibilities, and then it can be that all other controls, how it works. And I heard that probably in version 9, there might be consideration to add some kind of level of that. That would allow me to bring controls to much wider audience, saying, look, this is how you can do. If you want ISO 27001 formal way, yes, but realistically, it's as well sufficient, because through there you cover everything. So basically, to tell in another words, information security management system aspects bring in methodology. If they are there somewhere in the corner, but clearly listed as well as controls what it has to be done, then would be amazing methodology, because you just place it and it just works. So it can be additional control with all the aspects what needs to be done, and then I think it's going to be amazing, because right now in all, at least European Union countries, but as well elsewhere, saying, okay, we want it to work, but there has to be management layers. And then how to do that? Okay, it's ISO 27001. Okay, then go. What is in there? We cannot show you. You need to buy a standard. Okay, then it starts. But then discussing and saying, look, you just can achieve this same things if you don't need certification. Same things with methodology, and it works. Control list much more clear than ISO 27002. At least that's how I perceive, and it's much more practical.
No, that's very helpful, and I think, yeah, as you know, we've struggled with governance, right? That layer we added for version 8.1 of the controls. Just a mapping to NIST is a simple step, but that's far short of what you're describing here, which is a way for an open way to capture the spirit of this essential governance layer, but without the without the certification part of it, or the right verb that they use in 27001. So challenge heard, Vilius. We might have to call you in for consulting on this to help us think this through. Any other thoughts that you have for our audience? Because this is you are a unique person in this industry and someone I have great respect for. So anything you care to share with the CIS employees, company, our friends out there that listen to this show?
I'm grateful to know controls, and then to know through controls Center of Internet Security.
Very good.
And so I think Center of Internet Security is an amazing place. I feel really honored to know. I exemplify, even today, talking to Sri Lanka, I was showing what CIS is doing. Yes. And how it works, exemplifying other services like Albert system, and saying, look, this is what's being used for 50,000 organizations, and it works. So this is the way of thinking. You can achieve a lot when you're building national SOC, for example, or whatever it covers. So I use a lot of CIS methods and approaches, and the openness of Center of Internet Security is amazing. It's not something, it's for us, it's hidden. No, there's so many good and quality materials, in the sense even how to structure their services catalog. So it's not only about controls, but about benchmarks, security benchmarks, and all other things what CIS is doing for all of us. Amazing. No, so thank you.
No, and thank you for that too. We appreciate it. Yeah, it's I'm what am I now? 48 and a half years in cybersecurity. But I tell you, I had my first career in government, but it's very satisfying to be a part of this mission for all those reasons that you described, right? The ability to put together enough resources, smart people, to be the hub of a big community of volunteers, folks like you, to really help make security more accessible, understandable, and create the products to go with this. So it's a pretty neat opportunity for us all, and we appreciate the role that you've played with us, and will continue to play, of course, Vilius. So with that, thank you for joining us. It's been a pleasure talking to you. There's much more to talk about, and yes, and thanks for the nod to CIS. We are, by design, accessible. We are not a giant think tank. We're not a big government agency. You can talk to the individuals who are working on all the teams and so forth, and get right to it.
Yeah, thank you for being such organization and such force. It's a pleasure to bring that out and show to others. Look, this is a body of knowledge. Look, how much does it cost? Look, they're saying 20% of IT budget. Typically, it's only 10. But look, this is how calculations might look like. And all of that work, what you do. Thank you.
No, it's our pleasure. So for the audience, thank you again for your time and attention. And it's been a pleasure to feature one of the most amazing volunteers that CIS has. And someone we've been friends for quite a while here, lots of common interests. But one of the things I always appreciate about Vilius is that aside from all the super smart work that he does, he is thoughtful and challenges us to be better every time we interact. So that's greatly appreciated. So thank you for your time here. If you like this kind of thing, join us. There's lots of great episodes. We really enjoy the chance to share some information with the team here. Subscribe to the podcast in all the usual ways that you do that. And with that, we'll catch you for the next episode. Thank you. Thank you for listening to the podcast today.
The thoughts and opinions expressed by our podcast guests are solely theirs and do not necessarily reflect those of CIS.
Tune in on Wednesdays for a new episode. And in the meantime, visit our website at cisecurity.org.
Together, we'll continue our efforts of creating confidence in the connected world.